Hi, everybody. So last week we took a look at Kant's principle of universalizability as a formulation of the ultimate principle of morality. Well, this week we're going to look at an alternative formulation that he gave known as the principle of humanity. In this video, we're going to focus on the principle of humanity and sort of what it is and how to think about it. So we'll introduce the notion of humanity, the notion of treating something as an end, and the notion of treating something as a means. And we'll use these to help us understand what Kant's moral principle here says. Then we'll look at the value of a human being, as Kant has some interesting ideas in this regard and the role that that plays in his sort of theory. We'll consider some examples, and then we'll turn to a consideration of some of the previous cases we've looked at, and we'll see how the principle of humanity might apply and help illuminate our discussion of those cases. For instance, we'll take a specific look at the organ harvesting case and the large person trolley case. And I would encourage you to think about some of the other cases as well and see if you can apply the principle of humanity to those cases and see how well you think it does. But I'll just look at those two in this video to give you some initial examples. So remember, Kant thought that morality was guided by an ultimate principle that specifies a categorical imperative, where this is a duty or a command given by reason that we're obligated to follow regardless of our desires or beliefs. So what is this ultimate principle of morality from which all our moral duties derive? Well, Kant gave various formulations of that supposed principle of morality, ultimate principle of morality. We've already seen the difficulties with the principle of universalizability, but there's another formulation of this supposed categorical imperative that Kant gave that's been extremely influential. In fact, I think Kant gave 4 different formulations of it, and he thought they all were different words to specify the same ultimate sort of moral principle, but it's not clear that they actually are equivalent like he thought. So we're going to look at this one as a sort of alternative sort of ultimate moral principle in this sort of Kantian light. And it's known as the principle of humanity. And it says morality requires you to always treat a human being, yourself included, as an end and never as a mere means. So to understand this principle, we need to look at some of the sort of important terms, like a human being. So who is it that we have these moral obligations to? What does Kant mean by a human being? And an end. What does it mean to treat a human being as an end? And what would it mean to treat a human being as a means? Those are the key concepts that we need to get clear on before we can actually understand what this principle sort of specifies regarding our moral obligations. So when Kant spoke of humanity, he had a specific notion in mind. He wasn't using this as a biological term. He didn't mean Homo sapiens. He didn't mean things with a certain physical constitution and a certain genetic structure. Rather, what he meant was particular kinds of beings with certain features that thereby sort of gave it a certain moral standing. So he was using this as a moral concept for creatures that have certain features that thereby give them a certain kind of moral value. So a human being was anything that was a member of the moral community such that it has this distinctive kind of value that gave it certain moral rights that needed to be respected and made it worthy of a certain kind of moral respect and dignity from others. And in this way, the phrase humanity probably corresponds much more closely to our concept of a person. So it's something that has personhood. Personhood is oftentimes used nowadays as the concept that when something has personhood, that's what grants it certain moral rights. But of course, we need to think, well, what features, if it's not the genetic structure and the physical makeup that grants this moral status, well, what is it that gives something this kind of value? Well, on Kant's view, when he speaks of humanity, he means anything that has 2 features: rationality and autonomy. So rationality, you can think the ability to reflectively think about the principles by which we live and use our reasons to guide our choices. Now, autonomy is just, that ability to use our reason and then make our choice, so decide the principles by which we're going to live for ourselves. So being rational involves using our reason to tell us how to achieve our goals and to determine whether we can pursue them in a morally acceptable way. So this ability to reason about how to achieve our goals and our ability to reason about whether the way we're trying to achieve our goals is moral or immoral. That's what Kant means by rationality. Now notice, it takes a lot of brain power to be able to formulate your goals, to imagine a world where everyone pursues them as you do, and then ask about the consistency of your actions. So when he says rationality, he has a pretty high bar here. It's not just the ability to think and do things. It's the ability to specifically go through an argument and to sort of gain this sort of reflection on your thoughts and to think about the morality of your actions and how you are affecting others and not just yourself. Now, being autonomous literally means being a self-legislator. Autonomous people are those who decide for themselves which principles are going to govern their life. You're not a slave to your passions. You can resist temptation, check your animal urges, and decide for yourself whether to indulge them. You're not forced to act as you do, but you're free to choose your own path if you have autonomy. So that is, look, human beings, we are animals, and so we have animal urges. So you see that cake and you associate it with pleasure, and we have this animal drive to do the pleasurable thing. But we might use our reason and think, you know what, how about that? If I eat that cake now, I'm going to have a stomach ache in the morning, or look, I got to watch my sort of weight, or hey, the doctor warned me that my cholesterol is going up. Even though I feel that sort of animal urge, that temptation to eat it, I can use my reason to reflect on that and decide that that's not the best way to achieve my goals, and thereby use that to resist these natural sort of animal impulses. That's the idea of autonomy. Notice the connection. Reason and autonomy are related to one another on this view. Reason is a tool that helps us think about our decisions and thereby helps us to control our decisions and to change the principles by which we are living. All right, we also need to think about ends. So what does it mean to treat something as an end? Well, it's to treat them with the respect that they deserve, to treat them in such a way that you appreciate the value they have for their own sake. So the idea is you treat something as an end when you sort of see the intrinsic value that it has, and you thereby give it the respect it deserves. You appreciate that value in your actions. Well, what about a means? What does it mean to treat someone as a means? Well, it means to deal with them in such a way that they will help you achieve one of your goals. The idea is that there's something else that you recognize value in. So besides the person, there's something else you see value in, that you have a goal. That is your end. And you use that person as a tool for helping you achieve that other thing of value, that other end you have. Wait a minute. But don't we all treat each other as means for helping us achieve our goals, for helping us achieve our other ends, the other things we value? So for instance, you use the cashier as a means to help you purchase your goods that you care about and value. You use the waiter or waitress as a means to getting your food. You use the Uber driver as a means to getting to your destination. You use the plumber as a means to fixing your sink. You use a teacher as a means to getting an education or degree. So does the principle of humanity then imply that all these things are morally wrong since we're using persons as a means to our ends in this way? No. So you might pause and try to figure out for yourself, well, why not? How could you explain why these things aren't wrong according to the principle of humanity, even though we clearly are treating people as means in these cases? All right. Now that you're back, the principle of humanity does not say that it's morally wrong to treat others as a means, but rather that it's wrong to treat others as a mere means. That word merely is essential to understanding what the principle of humanity says. So this would be to treat a human being as nothing more than an object or tool. This would be to fail to recognize or appreciate the distinctive value that the person has for their own sake as a human being, or the value that they have as a rational, autonomous human person. Notice, it's possible to simultaneously treat a person as an end and as a means. What's impossible is simultaneously treating a person as an end and as a mere means. So, consider the waiter or waitress example. If you go to a restaurant, we can all notice the difference between the customers that are, all the customers there are treating the waiter and waitresses as a means to getting their food. But there's a big difference between the customers that are showing respect to the waiters and waitresses and those that are not. Even if you're using them as a means to get your food, you can still recognize them as their own end, their own thing of value, as their own human person that's deserving of respect and dignity. So the people that are just shouting angrily and maybe trying to trick this waiters into giving them a free meal, even though their meal was perfectly fine, those people are not valuing the dignity of this human person in front of them. In the same way, look, when I call up on the phone and I have to talk to AT&T about my phone bill, which I've had to do quite a few times, but when I call and it's the operator, you know what? I get pretty frustrated with the recording on the message, and I might curse a little bit. I might yell at the raise my voice against this machine. But once that operator comes on, where I know that it's another human being on the other side of the line, I'm much more conscious of how I am behaving, because I realize, okay, look, the machine I'm just using as a way to get to this end goal where I get my problem solved. But now when I'm talking to the person, yes, I'm trying to get my problem solved. I'm trying to use them to help me. But I'm also recognizing there's this other fact that this person themselves has value. The only thing of value is not just my goal of solving my problem. There's also this person that has value for their own sake, and I should treat them with dignity and respect as I'm trying to get them to help me. And I can do that. All right. Similarly, you could treat your teacher with respect and dignity, and while you also use them as a means to gaining an education or degree. So Schaefer Landau, the author of our textbooks, gives the following example of what it would mean to treat someone merely as a means. But what if, while the plumber is checking our leak, I remove a wrench from his toolkit and whack him over the head with it? He's out cold. Excellent. I then snugly fit his head into the space where the pipe has corroded, thus plugging the leak. While he's unconscious, I rush off to the hardware store and buy a cheap bit of PVC pipe. The plumber wakes up just as I'm returning from the store, and I scold him for falling asleep on the job. How could you? And I usher him out the door with a curt good riddance. Then I proceed to fix the leak myself, saving a hefty fee. Now, I'm not sure how much money you'd actually save doing all this, but the idea is, in this scenario, notice that you are literally treating the plumber as an object, as nothing more than a tool that's going to help you solve your problem of the leaky pipe. That's very different than when the plumber comes in, you greet them nicely, you give them respect and dignity, and you pay them the bill that you agreed upon. There's a big difference between treating that person with respect while using them as a means versus just treating them merely as a tool or object. So Kant believed that human beings have a distinctive form of value due to their rationality and autonomy. That is, we need to respect that value as we are engaging with that other person. And you need to respect the rationality and autonomy, the value that your life has itself, not just others, but yourself too. But that is, the value of rationality and autonomy is thought to be literally infinitely priceless on Kant's view. The value of rationality and autonomy is thought to give us dignity and make us worthy of respect, and more respect than anything else in the world that doesn't have rationality or autonomy. And the value of rationality and autonomy gives us a distinctive moral status when we compare this to anything else of value. And the value of rationality and autonomy is what grants us or entitles us to certain moral rights. So let's consider some examples that might motivate this picture that rationality and autonomy play this central role in explaining the value that human lives have and the moral respect and dignity that they thereby deserve. So imagine a burning building with a piece of artwork and an incapacitated human being. The piece of artwork is one of the most beautiful pieces ever created, with a sort of rich sort of history spanning back to the Renaissance. I don't know very much about Renaissance art, and it's loved by billions of people. And so people get joy from being in the presence of this piece of artwork, seeing its beauty, and also just knowing that they're looking at a piece of history. But the human being is sort of unknown and lives a quiet life with no family or friends. You only have time to save one. What do you save? Now, most people, when they say this, they're like, I don't even have to think about this. Obviously, you save the person, you save the human being, and that artwork should burn. Now, I mean, it's a sort of travesty that it burned, but when you're in that decision, that person's life, even if they're unknown, even if they live a quiet life with no family and no friends, their life is of infinitely more value than any painting could ever be, no matter how much joy it brings to other people in the world. Notice here, it looks like this is a disagreement with consequentialism. If I ratchet up just how many people that painting brings joy to, and I ratchet down how big of an effect that person's life has on other people, the consequentialist seems like they're going to have to say, maybe we should save that pain. Maybe that's the right thing to do, but that seems mistaken. It seems like we would all just naturally think, surely that human life has a value, a distinctive kind of value that painting could never achieve. What about another example? Imagine now a burning building with an animal and an incapacitated human being. The animal is a beloved YouTube star that has brought joy to billions of people around the world. The human being is unknown and lives a quiet life with no family or friends. You only have time to save one. What do you save? Yet again, most people's intuitive reaction is you should save the human being. Yeah, I don't care if they're unknown and live a quiet life that nobody really sort of knows them or cares about them much. There's a value in that person's life that this sort of animal, like let's say it's a mouse, that's a sort of YouTube star for some reason. I don't know. No matter how much joy that animal brings to other people's lives, even if they would be devastated to find on the news that this animal had died, and yet again, since this sort of human being, maybe it won't even make the news. I mean, this is grim and morbid, but people die every day and it never really makes the news. Despite all of that, it just seems morally atrocious to think that it'd be okay just to let that person's burn in order to save this mouse. How can we explain that? Why is that human life, even if it's unknown and has no family and friends, even if there's not many people who care about that person, where does the infinite value, that sort of extra respect and dignity that makes them deserving of more respect than the animal or the artwork? Well, the idea here is you can't do it in terms of how much joy something produces, because the artwork and the animal bring more joy. But also, you can't do it just in terms of whether or not something is sort of conscious. The animal is conscious and probably feels pain and pleasure as well. But what the difference here seems to be is that the human being has rationality and autonomy. And that would explain, if rationality and autonomy is where our dignity and value comes from, it would explain why we think it's right to save the person in both of these cases. Now, consider how the principle of humanity would deal with the following cases that we've looked at earlier. So think of the organ harvesting case. Well, in that scenario, you could save more lives by taking the organs from the person and saving the 5. But in order to save the 5, it looks like any doctor who just takes that person's organs without their consent is failing to respect that person as a human being. They are violating that person's own ability to reason and make choices for themselves. And they are treating them as a mere means to saving these other lives. They're treating them as nothing more than a pile of organs. And it looks clear that that is a violation of Kant's principle of humanity. Or consider the large person trolley case, where the trolley's headed towards those 5 people, and there's the large person that you could push in front of the trolley, and the collision would slow it down to save the 5. Yet again, you are literally using this person's body as an object. and you are violating their sort of autonomy, their ability to direct their own lives by pushing them in front of the trolley. And so on this view, you are treating them as a mere means for saving those other 5 lives. So even though that's a good consequence, you cannot get that good consequence in such a way that you treat a person as a mere means. Because on this view, the idea here is, notice, on Kant's view, the correct attitude to take towards value is not one of trying to maximize value like the consequentialists. The attitude we take towards value is a matter of respecting or appreciating that value. And so this large person has rationality and autonomy, and that gives their lives value. And insofar as we violate their rationality, their ability to use their reason and make autonomous choices, we are failing to respect the dignity and value that that person's life has. And that's why it would be wrong, despite the better consequences, on Kant's principle of humanity. So that's it for now. The next video will consider some of the advantages of the principle of humanity. See you then.